Taipei has just released Arc 8 Chapter 48, and this video will be a summary of the chapter. Highly recommend you check out my Arc 8 Chapter 47 summary. Anyways, let's begin. Yugard Valakia, the Emperor of Thorns, is known throughout the world. He is known for the story of Iris and the King of Thorns, a tragic love story. The ending was a tragedy, and therefore struck a chord with many readers. Although it has been a long time, there was a part of the story that was true. Their love was strong. Their love at the time was a fiery love, built upon the harsh times in an empire of war and betrayal. Iris and the King of Thorns had conquered Valakia. Not only that, Yugard Valakia embodied the iron-blooded code of the Valakian Empire. In other words, proof of power. Yugard Valakia is the most powerful emperor in the entire history of the empire. Groovy throws away his weapon, which had been cut in half. A moment later, it turned red and exploded. If Groovy failed to let go in time, he would have died. The Yang sword could light up anything it came into contact with. That's why he had to throw away his weapon. Groovy understands that in some situation, it's best to dodge. People like Mogoro or Goz would tank the hit and then be burned up and die. Groovy avoided the Yang sword, which is burning the city, but the next strike cleaves the world in two. The slash cut the top hairs off Groovy's head as he avoided it. Behind Groovy, the slash continued and destroyed many buildings. The blade is so sharp that even making a sheath for the weapon, known as the demon sword Murasame, would be extremely hard. For ordinary people, a single swing would cost your life. After all, it is a magical sword. Groovy calls out Yugard's name, and Yugard commends Groovy on knowing who he is. Groovy says that he is a book reader, and he is of course a 9 divine general. Yugard wonders that they still have that title. Groovy looks at his chest, which is pierced with the curse of Thorns. The assumption would be that the curse user would attack his opponents from afar and lurk around. However, this was the wrong assumption to be made, since the wielder of the curse was very powerful. The 9 Divine Generals was re-established by Vincent Valakia, but the 9 Divine Generals had disappeared and reappeared throughout the course of history. Yugard Valakia was the first emperor that got rid of the 9 Divine Generals, and Groovy wonders why. Because those below the emperor tried to take his life, and so he killed them, which is what Yugard says. So for those that don't understand, when Yugard was the emperor, the 9 divine generals tried to assassinate him, but he killed them all, and so he disbanded the 9 divine generals. Groovy pulls out axes and attacks Yugard, who blocks it with the Yang sword, and Yugard's face splits open. Groovy jumped back as his weapon burned due to hitting the Yang sword. The axe he used was a spell tool which vibrated at a frequency which would transfer to the enemy and crush their bones and organs. As Yugard, of course, was an undead, it wasn't that effective, but Groovy says he has more to try. Groovy throws an axe into the air, and Yugard slashes at it. Attack and defense is the name of the game. The battle appears to be even, but Groovy has sustained more damage. Groovy has limited tools, he is tired and poisoned. Anyone can see that he is at a disadvantage. Groovy once thought he was the strongest, but that changed when he met the other divine generals. However, he is like a jack of all trades, and possesses one trait that the others do not have: the persistence to kill his opponents, and the methods he uses to do it. Groovy vomits a bloody mist, and Yugard slashes at it with his Yang sword, but he gets blood on his wrist. The blood was infused with the poison Groovy ingested. However, the reason why Groovy used this attack was for another reason. A certain spell tool he could use, the Blood Axe. All of the axes that Groovy previously used in the fight homed in on Yugard's position from all around the battlefield. Yugard continued to dodge all of these axes as he ducked and dodged and weaved and bobbed. As he evades all of the blood axes which home in on him, Groovy spins a scythe and he flings it at Yugard. Yugard blocks the scythe with his yang sword and the chain explodes. Yugard is blown away and lands on the floor. Then his body is hit by the homing axes. Yugard's body was decimated. Then a voice rings out, telling Groovy to be proud. He's much stronger than any of the divine generals of his time. Groovy's right ear is cut off and Yugard appears and kicks Groovy away, saying that if he was around all them years ago, he would have been a problem. Yugard chases after Groovy, and Groovy touches his clothes, firing ropes, shattering his enemy's shoulder. Groovy peeled off his cloth, and he spread it apart to create a sort of like barrier to block his line of sight from Yugard. This meant that Yugard couldn't see where Groovy was. In Groovy's throat there is a magic stone, and Groovy activates it and fires an unblockable sound wave. Yugard, however, unleashes the nature of the demon sword. There's a saying that it eats to the core. The word core means to strike at the heart of a thing, but everything has a core. Every object, phenomenon, and even concept has a core that represents its essence. Murasame disliked that Groovy reforged it, and therefore Murasame cut the core of smell, meaning that Murasame could not be tracked by scent. Groovy's magic stone was cut in two, and he nearly also was cut in two, but he was saved in the nick of time. A tall man appeared. The intruder that appeared shocked Yugard and Groovy. After all, he appeared from absolutely nowhere. The man tells Groovy to not speak, or else he will never speak again, as his vocal cords are damaged. We saw that the way Yugard dodged the homing bloody axes was by cutting off his right arm, so that the axes homed in on the discarded arm. Now, of course, Yugard's arm was now regenerating. The man Halibel smokes his pipe and says that Yugard has no love. Yugard takes off his jacket and inspects his regenerated arm. The same curse of thorns was on Yugard's chest as it was on Groovy's and the werewolves. So for those that don't understand what happened near the end, it seems that Yugard also has the curse of thorns on his chest alongside Halibel, of course, because Halibel entered the arena, and Groovy. So the chapter ends there. It was a decent chapter. But I want to see what happens to the rest of the cast.